welcome to the Tea and a Buddy podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
Today's episode is about British fashion through the ages.
Yay!
Yay. This is what you wanted. A follower on Instagram wants fashion, us to talk about fashion.
I don't know that she meant through the ages.
Yeah, she did. Yes, you did, didn't you?
I
think
she meant, like, more recent, but you can't
We'll get more recent.
You kind of can't talk about, like, recent fashion unless we talk about where it came from, like how fashion evolved. And obviously, we're not, like, experts on historical fashion. I mean,
yes, we are. We're the experts on historical fashion.
We don't go to symposiums, like, where they're talking about...
seminars, all that kind of thing, we talk about all that kind of thing about the medieval fashions and everything.
Yeah, I mean, we know nothing really other than what we see in TV shows and paintings and...
And I think that's all they know too, the people who do it.
But we kind of wanted to talk about it because it's just like British fashion. I don't know if it can be considered just British fashion when we talk about this through the ages, but... Well, you've done a little bit of research.
I went on historicuk.com. That is the amount of research that I did. And they had a British fashion through the ages.
Okay, yeah.
Which is what we are talking about. So I was like, oh, wonderful. They've done it for me. So I just looked through it and I'm going to quote some of it because, I'm not a fashion guru.
Yes.
Unlike you.
This is as scripted as we get in this podcast.
This is scripted. We just talk.
If you guys want, like, really well thought out, like, written out, and we're just reading a script and we're like...
Oh, yes.
In 1532, da-da-da-da-da.
In 1532, there was a fashion revolution.
You've come to the wrong place, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, because we're like a lot of like, yes, what? But yes.
What is right?
What? But yeah, medieval fashions, well, we had a bit of a discussion about this. I guess it's Anglo-Saxon and Norman fashions.
Yeah, because I think the Middle Ages was a long time. What they call the Middle Ages, it was I don't know, it was a few centuries, I think.
I'm putting the Anglo-Saxon Norman period from 500 AD to like the 1500s. Mm-hmm. So yeah, from like the 10th, 8th, the 4th, 5th, the 5th century to the like 14th.
Yeah.
Something.
I mean, I took art history, but that was so many years ago. I'm sure we discussed all of this kind of thing back then.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't really know a lot about the period beyond probably what we've been watching in The Last Kingdom.
Yeah, because nobody really goes for it because not a lot of like literature or, or art came from that period.
Yeah,
I mean, survived it anyway. Yeah, I guess that's more of a thing. It survived it.
Yeah,
because I mean, back then they would wear the basic medieval garment,
which is
it's like a tunic, probably of wool, slightly fitted with a high neck and long sleeves, usually worn over a linen shirt.
A linen.
That's just the men.
A linen tunic worn over a linen shirt.
No, a wool tunic.
Oh, a wool tunic. Yeah. Okay.
Wool over linen, which the linen breathes, the wool doesn't, so it kind of keeps you warm, the wool. And I mean, maybe they would have had an extra layer in the
linen
winter.
Was probably to keep the itchiness of the wool off your skin.
Yes, itchy. Ugh, wool is really itchy. I mean, everybody who wears it knows.
But yeah, you mentioned...
It's fallen out of fashion as well, because I mean, cotton, and
wool?
everything.
Oh, yeah. I don't think so.
Nobody wears it as much as they did back then, though. I remember, I was there.
Well, I mean, yeah, you have so many vegans now that I think they try to be conscious about wearing.
Well, I mean, the synthetic wool, they've made it from synthetic, haven't they? Haven't they? Yeah.
I mean, I guess so. I assume so. I don't know. But yeah, you mentioned before when we weren't recording, I keep wanting to call him Arthur. His name is Alfred. King Alfred in The Last Kingdom. He's kind of standing there sometimes when he's not being king king.
Yeah.
You know, when he's just talking to his wife or whatever in the scenes, like they're in their bedroom or something. And he's wearing like what you described as basically it looks like a long nightgown.
It's like a long nightgown. Yeah, it's like, but it's linen, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's like a linen nightgown, and it goes down to like the knees and stuff. And that's what I associate with like bed clothes, you know?
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, that's what they would wear, I guess, when they take off the wool and everything, and that, you know, that was the under thing. And men could wear it. I mean, of course, women wearing that was like, oh, you know, just that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the women wore like a tunic that was kind of similar to what the man was wearing, but it was longer, and it had a semicircular mantle fastening on the shoulder.
Okay.
Whatever that
is.
Whatever that is, yeah, because, I mean, I don't know.
If we have any, like, fashion experts, chime in here for us, will you?
And apparently the lady covers her long hair with a hood held by a band and would carry a travelling pouch.
So a bit like a hairnet type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, bind it all up. Yeah, I mean, they showed that in The Last Kingdom as well.
Yeah.
But what I meant at the beginning of this is I don't know, is it or did I say that out loud? Was it just in my head? We'll never know unless we rewind this. Was this just British fashion, or was this like worldwide for the period?
I imagine. I don't know. I mean, this is just says British fashion.
I mean, okay,
so they're assuming that Britain was the only country in the world at that point.
Well, let's say. Well, no, let's say the Romans had already been there. And let's think about movies that we've seen from, like, set in Roman times.
Yeah.
I mean, they wore, like, a similar...
It was just long gowns, wasn't it? There was no, like, pants or anything.
It was skirts a lot, yeah. They wore, like,
it was like
skirts.
Their legs were out and stuff. It was just kind of like, oh, we just need a look. It's, you know, like cavemen. If you go back to, like, Neolithic times.
Yeah.
Cavemen... They were just like, oh, we need some sort of fabric to cover up our dangly bits.
Basically. And it
wasn't for modesty, It was just for protection.
Yeah.
It's like someone needs to invent shoes, man. You know? And so they invented, like, leather shoes, like, you know, killing animals and just skinning them. There's, these are quite tough. We can use these for shoes.
Stick them on your feet.
Stick them on your feet to, like, avoid the thorns and rocks and everything. And, you know, and apparently wet feet was a very big problem back then. So it was like, yeah, if your feet get wet, that's it. You're dead. You're dead, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, you know, it was just the basic kind of like tunic that covered the whole body, and it kept you know, it had the added thing of keeping you warm in like winter and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they would have had like underpants back then or anything like that. They would have thought like, oh yeah, underpants. We need some of them, you know.
I wouldn't think so.
You know, and obviously not bras or anything like that, you know.
I mean, let's go back to The Last Kingdom, because I'm sure that we saw, and I don't know how correct this is, but I'm sure that we saw Alfred wearing on top of that tunic like a long floor, like almost floor length, probably like a leather type vest. You could really call it a tunic also, but it would have been sleeveless, and he would have worn it on top of or actually like a robe, wasn't it?
It was kind of like a robe, yeah.
And that's sort of almost like what you could have seen Jesus in, or
something,
you know
yeah.
What I mean? Like, and they just crossed it like
it was
a
all
robe,
like,
and literally
we were all wearing what Jesus was wearing.
Yeah. I think that's, or what they were told, or what they saw in their art, or whatever, you know. But I think it was a thing that would cross across the waist, just like a robe or a dressing gown for any British listeners. Yeah. And you would tie it with a tie to keep it closed. You know, they'd have like a bit of rope or a tassel or something like that and tie it around the waist. But no, I can't imagine there were underwear at the time. No.
It also says the Anglo-Saxons were known for their skill in embroidery and braid weaving. So they would have had trims and stuff, you know.
It was very decorative.
It was a little bit of a decorative trim, just to look cute. Just look cute.
Yeah.
In my Anglo-Saxon time. But yeah, moving along to like the Tudor, Stuart era, which is like the medieval times that everybody knows, you know.
Yeah.
Castles and whatever. Then the men would start wearing an overgown with full upper sleeves, adding breadth to his shoulders. So yeah, like that kind of like Henry VIII kind of thing, you know, where it was like puffed out sleeves, and you know, and that was fashionable from about 1520, and he had a doublet. I guess a doublet. I don't know what a doublet is really, but it's just like I guess it's like a tunic.
I don't know. I'm not sure what a doublet is, but yeah, again, where did that come from? You know, the puffy sleeves. It's like, I get that that's like, oh, make your arms look big and like bulky, and you look more threatening, I guess, because you just look like you have a bigger body, because at that time, obviously, people were really thin, you know, they did not eat half as much as we eat today, or at least not the
I think
crap
Henry VIII, and they were little as well. They were very little people.
And they were very active as well. They were much more active.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was no, you didn't have stuff, you didn't have really, like, any comfort to sit about. I mean, there was stuff to be done.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, you know, we'll do that later. You know, we'll get to the business of doing that later. Let's just have a nap. You know? Or whatever, you know, just sit down and watch TV, you know, or whatever. You know, it's just like, it's like the entertainment was out there fighting the war and running about, you know?
Yeah.
So in the doublet, but I mean, also, half of your day was taken, you know, like you were talking about Danny Dyer doing the Henry VIII being medieval or whatever, you know.
Tell them who Danny Dyer is.
Danny Dyer, he's a Cockney geezer, isn't he? He's a soap star from EastEnders, and I think he presents some game show now on TV in the UK, but he's known for his Cockney geezer accent, you know.
Yeah.
And he went on Who Do You Think You Are, and he was related to, like, Henry VII or something. They found out he was related to the royal family in some distant form.
Yeah.
And he was just like, and everybody was just like, oh, what? Danny Dyer is related to the royal family? Of course he is, you know. And he's like, Diamond, yeah, you know. So they did like a little thing where he went back and says, oh, my ancestors would have worn this, you know.
Yeah.
So
he traced them back as far as he could.
And it's like he's some sort of like.
And they were like, put him in the clothes.
Put him in the clothes, you know, get to live a little in them. So, you know, he's putting on these hose, which are like, you know, he's putting on the breeches, he's putting on the pants, the thing, and he's being dressed, and he's like, God, all these layers, you know, and that would have taken half your day.
Because he put on the thing with the puffy sleeves, you know, and then they put like a long thing on top of that. That was like a long vest jacket.
And he needed like a bustle and a skirt. I guess it's a doublet, you know, a doublet or whatever, you know. It's like, it's loose with a seam at the waist and skirts.
Yeah.
And, you know, upper stocks, breeches, you know, are separate from his hose for greater comfort. So, you know, it's like they had hose on and breeches. And
then I remember, then he had on like a cape on top of that. And then they put on just like a big piece of animal hide on him.
And he's just like, this is heavy.
I can't even move. It's like, and I think a hat, of course, but.
And then, of course, the cod piece.
Oh, yes. That's the weirdest thing. All right. You have to, like, go in a little bit of depth explaining what this is all about, because I remember seeing it in, like, some paintings that we studied years ago, but I think it just went out of my mind after that.
I mean, I didn't really too much into why it kind of thing. I think it was
what is it though? What
it's like a cup.
Yeah.
For your manhood. And, you know, it's kind of like
shaped like a banana.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can get them in varying sizes. But I mean, you know, it's just for you to stand about like that, you know, with your hands on your hips and just wiggling it.
They literally like strapped it on.
They strapped it on. Yeah, I mean, you can have like one that's like modest, but usually people would have like big ones.
The more wealthy,
the more wealthy, like Henry VIII would have a big one, and you know.
They put this thing on Danny Dyer, you guys, And it was just like, he looks kind of normal standing from the front, and then he turns to the side, and it's just like sticking out.
It's sticking
under the
out.
skirt, right?
No, I think it's on
top.
top. It's on top of everything, yeah.
Okay, and it just sticks out like that, and I'm just like, what in God's name?
The cod piece.
What?
And it's like it's become a joke down the years about men who wore cod pieces, you know.
What did people think back then? I just do not understand how that was a thing. Like, how could you be taken seriously? I don't know. What in God's name went through people's minds?
I don't even know. Well, I mean, apparently, it must have been something. If you look further into it, it must have been something that they were doing in Europe. It's like, oh, this is all the rage in France.
Yeah.
This is all the rage in Ireland. You know, this is all the rage in Spain. I think Spain is where it came from. I can see it coming from Spain.
Oh, sure.
Or
blame
Italy.
the Spanish.
You know, Italy or Spain. You know, well, I mean, Italy wasn't a thing back then. I think it was just all kind of like Rome, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like this is the big fashion, you know. So everybody had that, you know, and the shirts as well were like black silk or silk with small frills at the neck, which would eventually develop into the ruff.
Yeah.
You know, everybody has the ruff, you know.
Obviously, stuff became more like flamboyant, and the materials became a bit more exotic and stuff. So obviously they were getting imports. Obviously some of these things were due to traveling from people from other places.
Yeah, and they were coming back,
like,
you know, they were coming back and saying, this is the fashion now. People are doing this weird thing, so we're going to do it, you know.
Yeah.
And they were just like, oh, yes, let's do it. The king's wearing it.
Yeah.
So, you know. And then... And
the
you know,
cod piece, I think, probably originally was literally like a cup. It was to protect yourself.
yes.
And then it was just like, oh, who's is big? Who needs the bigger one? You know? Oh, well, the king's has to be the biggest, you know?
Yeah, so everybody was like, oh, yeah, all the lords started getting in on it, you know?
Yeah, probably.
And so everybody
we've totally just made that up.
Yeah, I mean, we're just kind of hypothesizing here, but it seems plausible.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the women, until Queen Elizabeth came in, looked much the same as they did in, like, Anglo-Saxon times, I think, you know?
Yeah.
With everything. But when she came in, she had, like, you know, like those portraits you've seen of her with, like, the stiff dress and everything, you know? It's like, and the ruff and everything.
She had the same kind of
and the
puffy
wide
sleeves.
skirt and the bolsters and the drum farthingale, you know, all these things that they had to put on the Queen Elizabeth I, you know, to make her look queenly.
If you think of the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland,
yes,
I mean, she was basically modeled after Queen Elizabeth with the really big puffy skirt, and I think it looked like it was just stiff as anything. I don't know what it was made of, or if they put something on it to do that. And then of course everything was like jewel encrusted, wasn't it?
Yes. I mean, in the portrait they showed, it was of this woman. The sleeves are wide and the neckline low, with ruff open to frame the face. It is trimmed with lace newly introduced from Flanders and Spain, which was Belgium and Spain.
Oh yeah.
And Holland, I guess. Her pleated fan is a new fashion from China. Fashionable ladies no longer wore a cap, and her uncovered hair is dressed high with ribbons and feathers. So yeah, very much like Queen Elizabeth's was, you know.
Yeah.
So she had all that, and that's pretty much how everything remained throughout the Charles era as well.
You mentioned the ruff. Explain what that is, just for anybody who doesn't know.
It's a thing. It's like a
collar.
It's like a collar. Yeah, it's a collar that goes that I think is separate from the shirt, and it goes on. And people had, like, you know, small ones, or they had big ones, you know, like. But some people, like, I think they made fun of it in, like, Blackadder the Second. Like, you know, Percy had this massive ruff.
So,
you know, and it was
ruff,
like,
I think, is probably short for ruffle, because it's
a ruffle.
The way it was gathered.
Yeah, it looks kind of like a fan.
Like a fan, like an accordion.
Like an accordion, and it looks very stiff. And it's like...
Oh, they look so uncomfortable.
They look like... Why did these people wear this stuff?
Shakespeare. That's the most
Shakespeare.
famous person that you
he's
associate
got
with
he's got a ruff... Yeah, I mean, he was around... That was the fashion back then, you know? the ruffs and everything, you know. But I mean, that kind of remained all the way through the Tudor, the Stuart era, you know, with Charles II.
But, you know, that's the
and Oliver
Queen.
Cromwell and the Commonwealth and everything.
Like, the normal women were probably just looking totally like peasants. I mean, I can't imagine that the normal women wore anything but even remotely similar.
They just looked like they had since the Norman times. You know, I think it was just like there was no
women.
There was nothing to like, you know, like, oh, you know, there was nothing for them. You know, I can imagine, like, you know, if you're wearing this fantastic dress and everything with the silks imported from Spain and China fan and everything like that, and you went to a peasant town, they'd look at you like you were some sort of like crazy person.
Oh yeah,
they'd be like, what are you wearing?
I mean, really, they did look like crazy people though, didn't they?
Well, they did, yeah. I mean, to us now, it's like, oh, what were they thinking?
And they powdered their skin,
their face
so
and putting the beauty marks on.
Yeah.
And I mean, well, that takes us into the Georgian Regency era with Louis XIV or someone like that, you know, with the big powdered wigs.
Mm-hmm.
That became big news in Britain. Everyone wore them, all the gentry and everything, you know, like in the captains of the army, the judges, the navy. It was the fashion.
Yeah.
It was like a hat.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It was like you put on that like powdered wig and you just had the little curls and everything in the back, you know.
The little ponytail
and it's like,
in the back.
It was fine for like bald men, I guess, you know, because they could wear it all the time. But, you know, it was like, that was, you know, even men with like hair, full heads of hair would like slick it back and put that wig on, you know, and just be like, oh yes, this is wonderful.
Yeah,
you know, so it's like, oh yes, I'm in society now, you know.
And I have to think that the women must have been wearing wigs too, because
the women were probably wearing this high wigs.
Or at least hair pieces, like pinned into their hair, because the way they wore, like, you know how they, Marge Simpson in The Simpsons, you know, she's got that, supposedly it's a beehive, but it's like an extreme version of a beehive, you know. That's more similar to like the way women wore their hair in this period of time, and it's just like, how did they get their hair to like defy gravity? Yeah, to defy gravity.
To stay on their head.
And it looked just like so much hair. Like, who has that amount of hair? You know, there's so many curls, and then they'd have flowers in there, and like feathers and all kinds of things just like coming out. And then at the back, just one little curl coming down the back of their neck, you know.
I mean, it depends, and obviously it depends with, like, you know, if you were like a duke or a lord or whatever, you'd have this long flowing hair, you know, like with curls and everything like that, you know, just this long wig and everything.
Yeah.
And some would have like the short, like, you know, wig with just the tiny curls and everything like that. But yeah, the women's hair was like Marie Antoinette. It was all up there and whoosh, you know, like really big.
I mean, obviously it all was to show status, I guess. You know,
it was status,
to show wealth, to show status. Like, the bigger your hair is, the more wealthy you are, I guess.
And this is this is like the most famous, you know, this is the one that, because Jane Austen and, you know, the Bronte sisters and all that wrote stuff in this era, and illustrations and everything, and paintings and stuff. So it was like, this is an era of fashion that's well known to like the modern day. Yeah. Because they're showing it in, you know, like Emma and Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility and all that kind of stuff. You know, the men with their frilly shirts and tight breeches and Mr. Darcy, you know. Yeah. And, you know, the women in their kind of like, you know, one-piece dresses and, you know, and it's all very like the fan and of course the wigs and everything, you know.
Yes.
I mean, I think the informal day dress, there was an illustration taken from a portrait of Beau Brummel. If you know who Beau Brummel is, he was this big guy in the back in the day. He was a famous dandy. Oh yeah. And he persuaded men to think that dark, well-cut and fitted clothes were smarter than colourful, ostentatious ones, you know. Like, the Prince Regent would wear, like, these, like, he'd look like a massive peacock. He'd look like a trifle. Yeah. When he went out there. He'd be, like, layers of, like, glittering and everything, and everybody was like, oh, yes, very... And they'd be with their canes and jewels and everything. They look worse than the women. Yeah. You know, the men did. But this Beau Brummel was like, oh no, dark colours and fitted, and that's where that kind of like cut out jacket came from, you know, and the high-waisted like things, you know, like it looks like what the red coats wore and everything like that.
It was a jacket that was shorter in the front and longer in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Business in the front, party at the back.
Yes.
It's like, you know, it's like a cutaway cloth coat with brass buttons, plain waistcoat matching his pantaloons, which replaced the shorter breeches in about 1805.
Yeah, I think the more sparkly looks, the more silvery and pastel-y looks, those were all very French, I think.
Yes, that was, yeah.
Like the powder blues and the pinks and yellows and all the, like, swirly silver brocades, is that what you call it?
Broquettes, yeah.
Yeah. Sewn in there, and, you know, just all those patterns. That was definitely much more flamboyant. And then you went from that to, like, American Revolution times, where everything was definitely... I wonder if it had anything to do with... I mean, we'd have to look at what was going on in
the riding boots
in the world economies, you know.
Hats. Yeah.
It might have been... Because oftentimes fashion changes, like, when the economy's low, you're obviously not dressing, like, really flamboyantly.
Yeah, no.
Because it looks... You know, it looks bad. Like, it's not a good look to look so, like, rich and eccentric, you know, when people can't afford to eat.
Yeah, no, and you know, I'll get to that when we get to that. You know, so the next one is the Victorian era.
Oh yes,
which, you know, men started kind of dressing down with, like, you know, like suits. The suit that we know today kind of started coming out in Victorian era.
Yeah.
I mean, the cut anyway.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously there was, like, you know, the shirts and stuff, there was, like, stylistic differences and everything, you know, the lapels or whatever. But, you know, the suit that we know today was largely formed back then. But the women had to start wearing corsets. I mean, they would probably be wearing them anyway, but it was like, this was a big thing now. The corsets had to be tight.
I think they started wearing them, like, in Elizabethan times. I think she started wearing corsets,
And, you know, they had these, like, artificial crinoline, wide triangular skirts.
Oh, yeah.
That was supported on a steel wire. It was like a big, massive bird cage.
Yeah.
And then you had a bustle to support the rest of what was going on over that.
Yeah.
So it was like...
they didn't have tools to make petticoats out of.
They didn't,
then, you know, so it's just like, they had to have something to puff their dresses out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty look, but what you have to wonder where it ever came from, where the idea came from, like,
and why somebody was hat and tight collars, and sleeves that further
with
restricted
them. The collars and then clasped,
and everything was just like, and you know, they had to kind of walk like that, didn't they? Because they couldn't move any other way. So, you know, you see the Victorian era people moving like that, and it's just like, they couldn't.
And the bustles,
the bustles were huge, and just like made you look like you had this, like, bird cage. Where you were sitting around on this birdcage, I mean, then as kind of like the late Victorian era went on, women started going for more, like, slimming down version, kind of like what men were wearing. There was, like, this tailor-made movement, the Rational Dress Society.
Yeah.
And it was like a masculine style, plain tailor-made, you know, with the aim of making dress healthier and more comfortable, because, you know, you were killing yourself getting in that dress.
Well, women literally were fainting all the time.
They were fainting all the time because they couldn't breathe.
Yes.
And then every time they moved, they just went, ugh, you know, and collapsed, you know.
Can you imagine? I mean, it's no wonder why so many women had miscarriages and why so many...
Well, yeah.
It's just like, because they continued to wear that kind of stuff even when they were pregnant.
And it's like it took a team to get it off you.
Yeah.
It was like a suit of armour, really. Going into the Edwardian era, which kind of lasted up until wartime. So there was like a shorter, low-waisted dress introduced in about 1920. Loosely cut and concealing and not defining the figure, flat-chested women were about to become fashionable.
Yeah, because in Victorian
and hats were
times
small
and actually for for a long time before the
flapper
Victorian
period,
times.
the flapper period.
It was all about pushing
the boobs up.
Yeah.
Get them in the face, you know. I mean, you know, this was the 1880s, not the 1980s. You know?
But yeah, women must have been just like, when the flapper era came, you know, it's just like,
well, the flapper,
we actually have room to breathe.
Yes,
and
I mean, you know,
everything's
the
like loose,
frilly and like, what's that? Fringe,
yeah,
fringe stuff. Yeah, and I mean the tight curls.
They showed their ankles.
They showed more than their ankles. Some of them. And of course the men's, you know, men's dress hasn't really evolved that much.
No, since then,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of the same kind of thing. It was like tight fitting suit. It's kind of gone. That's the only kind of thing. It's like tight fitting, then loose fitting, then tight fitting again, then loose again. And then tight again, you know?
It's like anything else. You get tired of one thing and you know, it's like when I was in high school, flared jeans and bell bottoms were back in style. And then, you know, shortly after that, it was all about the skinny jeans. And we're kind of in a skinny jeans phase right now. And then it'll be like wide-legged coming back before too long.
Yeah, no, that's what happens with men's fashion. It just goes wide or skinny. And it's like, you know, it's, you know, that's what it was. You know, the the hat and the spats protecting his shoes. You know, that was the big thing in the 20s and up until like the 40s, I guess. But in the 30s, then it started getting wide-legged, and the shoulders starting. And
the zoot suits.
The zoot suits, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like square at the shoulder with a fairly natural waist, I guess. You know. It's
interesting because I like both looks. Really, I can get into both styles.
Yeah, because I think men had shoulder pads in their suit jackets at that time as well. But then when wartime hit, it was back to the basics for British people.
To straighten up and no more loosey goosey anything.
It was kind of like people wore what they could afford and clothing rationing and everything, and it wasn't until 1947 when Christian Dior presented a fashion look with a fitted jacket and a nipped-in waist, which everybody, you know, that's like the wartime look that they go for in these period dramas now. Is like that, you know, and a full calf length skirt, and you know, because you know it was like a use of fabric, you know, it was all this fabric, you know, and it was like, oh, you know, you're using a lot of fabric there, it's lavish, you know, because of the thing, and it became known as the new look, you know. And then of course, like, you know, that's how it kind of remained until the 60s. And
we all know what happened.
And we all know what happened then. Mini skirts.
But yeah, we'll
Mary Quant.
We'll do another. We kind of covered the 60s fashion in our British Invasion podcast. If you guys haven't listened to that, go check that out. But yeah, we'll do another one of these episodes where we sort of just talk about British fashion pieces that are more popular in Britain, or that started in Britain and then came over here, something like that. Yeah, so look for that to come. I don't know when we'll get to it. We've got a full schedule. We've got
December. A full schedule, yeah.
But yeah, I think that'll do us.
That'll do us.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your support.
Oh, yes. Wonderful it was.
If you'd like to support us further, be sure to check out our Amazon shop on our website.
Amazon shop.
You can use that link to just click through and do your normal Amazon shopping if there's not anything in our actual recommended stores, groups, categories, whatever you want to call it on our shop.
Whatever.
That you want. You can just use that to click through and do your normal holiday shopping, and we'll get a little bit of a commission off of whatever you buy. So thank you so much for your support, and we'll talk to you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.